Last week we talked about a life of worship, and today we are just continuing that theme a little bit. Last week we talked about what is a life of worship, a life that is a heart that is satisfied in God, a will that is surrendered to God, a life that is being transformed by God. Right now, this week we're going to look at one practical way that happens. What is the evidence that you value God above all things? What is the evidence? You can always claim that, but what is the evidence? What is the result of a life that truly worships God? When you say you are growing in satisfaction, you're growing in surrender, you're growing in transformation, what does that life look like? And there is one thing that's going to look like, right? One aspect that is going to be the evidence of it, the result of it, is a life that forgives others. It's a life of reconciliation. It is a direct outcome of the gospel. If you've read some of the stories when you were young, one of the stories is the Count of Monte Cristo. I don't know if you've seen the movie or read the story by Alexander Dumas. The story is based in 19th century France. It's about Edmond Dante. He's a young sailor, kind of looking forward to the future, all of his ambition, but his life is shattered because he is betrayed by people he knows. Right? He's falsely accused, unjustly imprisoned. For 14 years, he's in prison, right? In a kind of an island prison, lost everything. And in that time, he is consumed with bitterness and anger. He's plotting his vengeance. He wants to get back at the people who betrayed him, right? And eventually, he makes it out of the prison. He becomes wealthy. He becomes the Count of Monte Cristo. He becomes a count, and then he plots the ruin of everyone who betrayed him. And the story is fascinating, right? I mean, it's written to show how he pours his vengeance. He's scheming. He's spreading rumors. He is destroying reputations. He's going after each one, and every time he feels justified by his actions. Why? Because they've done great harm to him, and in some way they deserve that. Right? So he feels justified. But as the story progresses, you begin to see how, even though he feels justified and he feels happy about the outcomes, he sees the cost of unforgiveness in his life. It's not only that people are paying for what they've done to him, but he sees that others are suffering. There's so many else who are suffering because of his posture of unforgiveness. Right? One of the classic stories that we can think about. Right? There's another poem by William Blake, a powerful poem. It's called The Poison Tree. Right? Let me read it for you. It says, I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath, and my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with my smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning, glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. Now, what's happening? This speaker he is harboring bitterness and grudges, and it is with his smiles, with his thoughts, and with his self-pity, and all of those things. And soon, in an imaginary kind of poetic way, he says it soon bore a fruit so bright, like an apple so bright, and the other person wants to come and engage with him. So he walks into the garden, he sees the apple, he understands it's his, and he eats of the apple. The next morning, this person wakes up that his friend is lying dead near the tree. The consequence of unforgiveness. Right? See, we all know from popular stories and movies and poems. We all know how important it is to forgive. You don't need to be the follower of Christ to understand this. Anybody knows this. right? We all know how it ruins lives. We all know these things, but we understand, because if we can be honest with ourselves, we understand how difficult and powerless we are to forgive people. You can avoid, you can move on, you can do all this dance, right? But no, it is difficult to forgive. And we are powerless. We are powerless. Maybe you're sitting here and saying, Ranjit, how can I forgive? How can I forgive somebody who has abandoned me? How can I forgive? How can I forgive my father who abandoned me? How can I forgive my father who betrayed my mother? How can I do that? How can I forgive my mother for what she did to me? How can I forgive people for what they've said to me? How can I forgive? How can I forgive my spouse who's hurt me so much? How can I forgive this person who betrayed my confidence, who abused me? So it is real. This is not easy, right? This is real. And if you're struggling today, maybe you're young and you're like, no, well, I'm not in this position. If you live long enough, at least to where I am here today, I mean, we will have enough people. We will have enough people to forgive and to ask for forgiveness, right? So this morning, God is calling us to something. And in Matthew, and I've titled this sermon, Forgiven and Forgiving. Forgiven and forgiving. We're going to look at why and how very quickly, right? Why forgive? Why forgive? This parable gives us a reason why you forgive. And in all of Scripture, we see the reasons to forgive, the encouragement to forgive, the admonishment to forgive. But in this parable, you see a warning to forgive. We see a strong warning, right? Here is Peter asking Jesus how many times to forgive. And he says, Peter asks, 7 times okay, right? Because at that time, the rabbis were teaching, hey, 3 times is the limit, meaning you forgive once. If they do something bad, you forgive another time. Well, third time is the thing, right? And so Peter is asking Jesus, well, can I forgive 7 times? So because he's saying, well, I'm more generous, right, than what they are teaching us is 7 times. So he's expecting Jesus to kind of applaud him. But Jesus tells him, what did Jesus tell him? No, 70 times 7. Or 77 times, whatever that number you understand. Basically, it means you forgive as many times as it takes. That's what Jesus says. As many times as it takes. Right? And it creates a lot of question. And so Jesus begins to narrate a parable, the master communicator, right? He begins to tell a parable of a king, and he's got a governor. He calls him a servant or a slave, but the idea is that he is, because of the debt that you kind of see, he's a provincial governor, right? He's in charge of a region, and his job is to collect taxes and give it to the king, right? So the king is calling this governor to give account for the taxes he's collected. And he begins to realize this governor, this servant, owes him 10,000 bags of gold or 10,000 talents. Now you need to understand this, right? It is basically an amount that is enormous. It is impossible to pay this amount. This is like, it is billions and zillions, right? At that time, 1 talent, okay? If you understand, if you're quick to realize math, some people are very difficult with numbers, right? So I'm going to forgive you. But if you understand, 1 talent is 20 years of work. 1 talent, 20 years. 10,000 talents. Huh? 200,000 years of work. That's 2,500 lifetimes, right? So basically, you need to work for 2,500 of your lifetime to kind of come to this amount, right? So basically, when Jesus pronounces number, the listeners are understanding this is an impossible task. You cannot pay this, right? In fact, at that time, 10,000 was kind of the highest Roman kind of numeral as well, right? So that's like the zillions and trillions, billions, whatever our highest number is. It's back there. So here is a king who takes account, and this guy owes him something he can never pay back. And so the king orders his arrest and puts him in jail. And so that's justice, right? And so there's nothing wrong with what the king is doing. He's not a tyrant. That he has mismanaged something. He's not paying him back. He puts him in jail. But this servant pleads with the king, right? He's pleading with the king. And the king realizes, well, he's mismanaged it. I don't know how he mismanaged such an amount of money, but he's mismanaged it. And so he forgives. The king does the unthinkable and forgives the person and decides to pay himself, right? Meaning he says, I'm going to let this go. But the servant does the unthinkable, right? Even as we see the compassion of the king, the servant does something unthinkable. Verse 28, the servant has another person in his life who owes him 100 denarii, right? Or 100 silver coins. This is like 10,000 bags of gold. This is like nothing compared to what this is, right? And but in verse 28, he grabbed him and began to choke him. And he says, pay back what you owe me, he demanded. In verse 29, the servant pleads and begs. He asks him to be patient, but he refused. He throws him into prison till he pays the debt. Now, when the king hears this, the king realizes, no, there's something here. This is not just mismanagement. Right? This is not mismanagement of funds. This is not he's like dumb and stupid and foolish. No, there is corruption. There is an evil in his heart. Okay, so that's why the king replies in verse 32. He says, and the master called the servant and he said, you wicked servant. You wicked, not foolish servant. You wicked servant. He said, I cancelled all the debt, your debt, because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? And in anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed, meaning he's never going to get out of jail. And Jesus concludes the parable in verse 35. He says, this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. It's a warning. It's a warning. Hey, we have to be careful when you come to God's word. This is not, we are not like, oh, God will just, no. It is clear. Jesus is basically saying, hey, if you harbor bitterness and are unable to forgive, you are already in the prison of your anger. You are already in the prison of your bitterness. And Jesus is saying it's going to become eternal if you don't forgive. But you're asking me, Ranjit, aren't we saved by grace? Isn't Jesus forgiving? What is this? Is Jesus saying if you forgive, then you will be forgiven and you will be saved? What is this, works? What is this? No. What Jesus is saying is, well, if you have tasted the gospel, this is what's going to happen in your life. If you say, Jesus, you are number one. I value you above everything. If you claim that, then your life is going to let other people go. You're going to be able to forgive people. You're not going to make their offense greater than what Jesus has done for you. You tracking me? That's the practical aspect of what you're claiming. So at the least, if you're not able to forgive, what Jesus is saying is, at the least, you're blocking his love. You're blocking his grace and his power to be active in your life. At the least. That's the least of it. That itself is not good, but that's the least of it. But it could be easily possible that you've never really accepted him. You can claim that he is Lord of your life, but he's never Lord of your life. This is that important. A forgiven person becomes forgiving. That is the gospel. That is the gospel. That's why Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgives you. Right? Ephesians 4:26 says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Don't hold on to bitterness and anger and grudges through seasons of life. Don't. If you value Jesus and what he has done above everything, you should be able to let this go. Or are you going to value this more than Jesus? That's the question here. Why forgive, right? And so I'm going to quickly talk about how to forgive. You're like, Ranjit, I understand this. I understand. Ranjit, I understand this. But how? How do you forgive? How do you do this? This parable gives you a beautiful framework. All right? Let's look at verse 27. How do you forgive? Verse 27 gives you a biblical framework for forgiveness. It says the servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. Right? The king, right? The master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. This is a biblical framework, a simple yet a powerful biblical framework for how to forgive. Let's look at this phrase by phrase. Took pity on him. What does that mean? Took pity on him. It simply means you're feeling compassion for the other person. You're feeling sorry for the other person. It literally means, that word literally means your heart goes out to the person. This is one of the words that is most frequently used to describe Jesus' emotions. Jesus, every time, right, in Matthew 9, when he sees the crowds, they are harassed and helpless, and his heart goes out for them. He's compassionate. In Matthew chapter 14, he saw the crowds, and they were sick and tormented, and his heart goes out in compassion for them. In Matthew 15 and Matthew 20, Jesus' heart goes out with pity and compassion. This is one of the words that is most used to describe the heart of Jesus. Is constantly feeling compassion for people. You cannot forgive someone unless you sense compassion in your heart. You cannot. Unless you are. So what is this? What is this compassion? How do you have pity on somebody, or how do you have compassion on somebody? Right? If you don't have compassion, let me tell you what happens. If there is no compassion, this is how it's going to play out, right? You're going to feel superior to the person. You're going to feel like you're right always. You're going to feel like you're better than somebody else. You're going to be full of self-righteousness. You're going to look down on the person. Right? And you will in some way make that identity. Oh, they lied to me. They are liars. They did this to me. And you're going to look down on somebody. That is a heart that is proud and feeling superior. Right? A heart that is feeling superior, that lacks compassion, that is self-righteous, will never be able to forgive. Sometimes you wonder why people stay mad for such a long time. Why? It's a heart that is proud. And this is where God says, I resist the proud. How do you know you're proud? Forgiveness. Forgiveness gives it out. And this is why Jesus is saying, I will resist the proud. Right? So a lack of compassion says, I did everything right. They are wrong. How can they do this to me? It is their fault. It is a posture of self-righteousness, a posture of superiority. But when you have compassion, when there is compassion in your heart, this is how it's going to look like. You're going to look at the person and say, hey, yeah, I know you've done this to me. I know this is horrible. Man, I know, how could you do this to me? But then you realize you are just like the other person. You are no different. You are no different. You are able to see, no. I have the same capacity for evil. I have the same capacity. I do the same things to people, maybe in different ways, but I am just the same. In fact, if you're even more honest with yourself, you can say, I am even worse. I'm even worse. You tracking me? Right? That is compassion. A heart that goes out in compassion realizes, no, you are no different. You are no better. That's a heart of humility, to be able to understand, I am just like the other person. I'm just like the other person. Right? Hey, to be able to forgive, right? Forgiveness is a process. To be able to forgive, you need to have a heart of compassion. You need to have a heart that is humble, that is able to empathize. And that is the beginning of forgiveness for even the worst offender in your life. But if you are holding on to a self-righteous posture, you will never be able to forgive. So we see what's biblical forgiveness looks like. The first thing that happens is you take pity on the person. You show compassion. What's the next thing that Jesus says? Right? What does the king do? He cancels the debt. He cancels the debt. Right? What is the debt? The debt is 10,000 talents. It's billions and trillions and zillions. It is unpayable. There is no way this person will be able to pay it back. And so, what does that do? The king forgives the person. What does that mean? It's like, okay, no, it's okay. No, it's not, it's okay. No, he forgives the person, but who pays the debt? Who pays the debt? The king pays the debt. He loses it, and he pays the debt. That is biblical forgiveness. So this is where I want you to understand what the parable is. The point of the parable is, hey, this person, the debt is real, it is enormous. And this person cannot pay it back. And the king forgives. Now, what does that mean? My friend, what has happened to you is real. Your pain is real. The angst for justice, the pain and the brokenness you feel in your heart, it is real. It is enormous. There is a debt. Somebody owes you a debt, at least a sorry. Somebody owes you something. It is real. It is real. And sometimes it is so enormous, they can never make it right. They can never make it right. They can never pay you back. There is no way. And so sometimes in our minds, and this is why we struggle to forgive, because we are in our minds we're thinking, Ranjit, if you know what this person did to me, there is no way they can set it right for me. There is no way. Ranjit, there is no way you can go back in time and change what has happened. There is no way I'm going to get back that opportunity. There's no way we can build this relationship. The time is gone. Do you think the other person is able to give me my childhood back? No. Do you think they're able to set right some things in my life? Do you think they're able to give my innocence back? No. Everything is lost. And so in our minds we think, what is the point of forgiving? Why forgive? What's the point here? I'm not going to get anything back. It's not going to change anything. So what's the point of forgiveness? Let me tell you, it is because they are unable to pay it back. That is precisely why you have to forgive. You've got to forgive. Oh, you got to forgive. My friend, biblical forgiveness, this is biblical forgiveness. Biblical forgiveness is a posture where you have two options here. You can either make the other person pay. You tracking me? There's a debt. You can make the other person pay. Or you pay. That is forgiveness. It is not easy. You can either make the other person suffer. And I'll tell you how we do it. You can make the other person suffer. Or you suffer. And that is forgiveness. Forgiveness is not easy. It is not some feeling. It is not some happiness that no. It is suffering. It is a payment. The question is, who's going to pay for it? Forgiveness is a posture where you say, I'm not going to demand payment from the other person. And I use this illustration a lot. Even after the first service, my dear friends made fun of me. You're always using the same illustration. I've added a few details here, so just pay attention to it, right? So imagine an auto man, poor auto rickshaw guy, and he's driving his auto in Chhatarpur, and out of Chhatarpur farmhouses comes a Rolls-Royce Phantom, right? One of the most expensive cars, right? So it's coming out, it's rolling out of the farmhouse, and here is a poor man who is driving his auto, and for some reason he kind of bangs into the car and he breaks the bumper of this car. Rolls-Royce Phantom, 10 crore car. Huh? 10 crores. I don't know why they... Anyway. And he breaks the bumper. You know what the bumper costs for a Rolls-Royce? Let me read it for you. Right? AI is telling this, right? It says replacing. I put it in, I said, okay, how much does a Rolls-Royce bumper cost? How much? It says replacing a bumper on Rolls-Royce Phantom is considerable expense. With genuine parts, he's not talking about the Karol Bagh, right? With genuine parts, potentially costing upwards of $23,000. 20 lakhs for a bumper. 20 lakhs. And of course, AI says it's excluding shipping taxes and labor, right? Imagine this. Imagine this. So here is a wealthy owner. He's coming. His bumper is broken. It's a considerable amount, right? It's a important. And so here is an auto man. How will he pay? How is he going to pay? How is an auto man going to pay for 20 lakhs of a bumper? No, he's not. So here is an auto man who's, let's say, he's pleading with the owner of the car. He's saying, please let me go. There's no way I can pay this back. The owner has two options. The owner can really squeeze the guy. He can put him in jail. He can take what he owes. He can destroy him, right? That's an option. You can make this man, poor man, suffer, or the owner can forgive and let him go. Now, you're like, oh, that's wonderful, nice Bollywood movie. No. Who's going to pay for the bumper? Who's going to pay for the bumper? Bumper is not free. You go to Rolls-Royce showroom and you're like, hey, I forgave the automan. Oh, wonderful, sir. Take a free bumper. They're not going to give you free bumpers here. Who's going to pay for the bumper? If you forgive, the owner has to pay. The owner, my friend, that is biblical forgiveness. That is you have to pay. See, you got to cancel the debt. Cancel the debt involves a payment. And my friends, we think forgiveness is avoiding somebody. We think forgiveness is just forgetting and, oh, it's okay, right? We're just moving on, we've forgotten, we avoid. We think that's forgiveness. No. God is calling you to a real forgiveness here, right? Real forgiveness is not just moving on and avoiding and all of that. No. Real forgiveness involves paying, right? Paying a debt. Now, what does that mean? Do you know we make people pay? We make people pay. Every time we gossip about something that somebody did to us, we are making them pay. We are making them pay. We are demanding payment. Every time we slander someone, every time we bring it up, we are demanding payment. We are making them pay. Right? Every time you ignore the person, you act in unloving ways, every time you withdraw your friendship, you give a cold shoulder, every time you want to say something sarcastic, you are making the other person pay. You are demanding payment. You say you're forgiving and all that. No. You are demanding payment. You're making them pay. No, biblical forgiveness, God calls us to say, hey, this is going to be, every time you want to say something nasty, but instead you want to say something kind, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. That's part of biblical forgiveness. You pay. Every time you want to curse that person, but you pray for the person genuinely, oh, your heart is bleeding. Every time you want to slice that person with your words and with your actions, you want to slice their reputation, and instead, you are sliced in the process when you hold your tongue. That is forgiveness. That is forgiveness. See, one of the things that we do in our culture, and especially in marriages, is this thing of silent treatment, right? We are like kings of silent treatment in India, right? When I got married, and I'm ashamed of some of these things, right? So when I got married, Deepa was the oldest in her family. I was the oldest in my family. And you get married to oldest in the family, man alive, there is like a potential for all kinds of disaster, right? Because she has two brothers. She has ordered the brothers all her life. I have one brother, my little slave. I've ordered him all my life. And so we get married and we are ordering each other. Right? We are like, who's going to do this? Right? So we are ordering each other. Man, it was just potential conflict. The first year of marriage was so difficult, right? Because we didn't understand our personalities. And so when conflict happens, Deepa is a verbal processor. She wants to process it immediately. I am a withdrawer. I don't want to process things. I'm an internal processor, so I become quiet, right? So I'm kind of withdrawing. She's trying to come at me. So it was just, so there are times when I will just not talk for like 3-4 days. Okay? I used to give the silent treatment, right? And in my defense, in my mind, I'll be saying, no, I don't want to escalate this. I want to do the loving thing. I don't want to create more problems. I don't want to say more bad things. No, so I think it's very loving, right? What a loving husband I am, right? So that's why. Eventually, when we went for some counseling and to really understand this, the counselor told me, Ranjit, every time you give your spouse, every time you give Deepa the silent treatment, you know she suffers. She suffers. Do you know her state, her emotional state in that silence is anxiety and fear. She is most vulnerable in this relationship. when you give that silent treatment. And she said, Ranjit, every time you give the silent treatment, you are making her pay. You are making her pay. Don't give this rubbish that you are loving her. No. You are demanding payment. We've tried to work hard on that. We've tried to work hard. Right? Hey, my friend, I want you to understand this. We have different ways of justifying this payment. We have different ways of justifying. No. The biblical forgiveness is you cancel the debt. You cancel the debt, and it involves a payment, and you pay. You don't let the other person suffer. Right? You don't demand it from the other person. You don't withdraw. You're not unkind. You're not sarcastic. You're not unloving. You're not avoiding. No. Where there is a payment, you say, no, I'm not going to demand the payment from you. I'm going to pay for this. Right? And lastly, let them go. Let them go. Have pity on them, cancel the debt, let them go. Let them go, set them free. They are not liable to you. They don't owe you anything. You pay for it, let them go. This is a framework for biblical forgiveness. Now, you're sitting here and thinking, and I'm sure there's 100 questions in your mind. Maybe one of the questions is, Ranjit, what if they don't say sorry? What if they don't say sorry? How do you forgive somebody like that? And I want you to understand, forgiveness is between you and God. Right? Before God, you forgive the person. Before God, right? When the person says sorry, when you're able to talk to the other person, well, you can reconcile. Reconciliation is the next step. Right? It's like shaking hands. Right? You're willing to offer your hand of reconciliation. If the other person is not willing to admit it, if the other person is not willing to say sorry, then you're not reconciled. You're not able to become friends. You're not able to come together. But that's the second part of it. Forgiveness happens without all of these things. You can forgive the person just between you and God and say, Lord, I set them free. So the other person's sorry is not what makes you forgive them. Then that's transactional. Okay? Maybe you're sitting here, you're asking, Ranjit, well, they don't deserve it. They don't deserve forgiveness. And I want to gently remind you that is a position of pride, because my friend, we are no different. We don't deserve. Who are we to deserve anything? Who are we to say who deserves what and not? We don't deserve anything. So I want you to check your heart when you're saying, no, they don't deserve it. No, forgiveness is going to happen when you are humble in your heart and you show compassion. Some of us are asking, Ranjit, what about justice then? What about justice? What about justice? Does forgiveness mean, no, you don't seek justice? I want you to understand this. Very briefly, I'm helping you understand your objections, right? If you're going to, forgiveness, if you're going to seek justice without forgiveness, it is not justice, it is vengeance. You tracking me? No. You forgive the person and then you seek justice. Otherwise, it's going to be vengeance. You're going to act in revenge. Ranjit, what about abuse? What about crime? What about some of these people who hurt you again and again? Forgiveness doesn't mean you get back into the relationship. Forgiveness doesn't mean you put yourself back in an abusive kind of place. No, my friends, no. There are times when you need to keep a distance. There are times, so forgiveness is independent of all of those things. You forgive the person, but you may have to keep distance. You may have to forgive and make them accountable. You may have to forgive and report it to the authorities. You may have to forgive and maybe end the relationship. There are so many things in that, but forgiveness is different. So forgiveness doesn't mean you get back into some of these kinds of things. Right? One of the other things people tell me is, Ranjit, I'm not ready to forgive. And let me gently encourage you, you will never be ready. I don't feel like I want to forgive. No, this forgiveness needs to happen before the feeling happens. Right? Forgiveness, if you wait for the feeling, you're going to end up in prison. You're going to imprison yourself. right? When you grant forgiveness before you feel it, you will eventually feel the forgiveness. You have to grant it. It's a decision. It's intentional. People ask me, Ranjit, what if I feel like I've forgiven them, but every time I see them, I feel like the memories are there. Every time I encounter or every time I think about my home, or the memories come back. What do I do then? Does that mean I've not forgiven them? No. When the memories come back, when you feel some of those aches and angst in your heart, you forgive again. You forgive again. You say, Lord, I did forgive. I'm not feeling good right now, but I want to forgive this person again. I want to forgive again. See, forgiveness is refusing to supply oxygen to bitterness. Forgiveness is refusing to supply oxygen to self-pity, to self-centeredness, to ego, to bitterness, to anger. You are refusing to supply oxygen to it. You come to Jesus and say, Lord, I'm going to have compassion on the person. I'm no different. I'm no different. I'm no different. In the capacity that I have, I could be even worse. I'm no different. And you pay the penalty by yourself. You're not making them pay. You pay it yourself. And you let them go. Maybe you're saying, Ranjit, it's too hard to forgive. It's too hard. And I know it is too hard. Some of the things are too hard. Maybe it's easy to forgive your friend. It's very difficult to forgive your spouse. Maybe it's easy to forgive your children or a stranger or a co-worker. It's very difficult to forgive your parent. It's really hard. Some relationships are hard to forgive. And this is why you need the gospel. The gospel is the one that helps you to forgive. This is not your power. This is not your self-motivation. No, my friend. The gospel gives you the power. How do you know? Because Jesus in the gospel does the exact same thing for you. In the gospel, we have sinned against the holy God. And our sin is not a mistake. Our sin is not some kind of foolish, unwise decision. Sorry, it's a slip of the tongue. Oh, I just lied here. No. Your sin is against a holy God. It is a cosmic offense. And it needs a cosmic payment. Your sin is of infinite proportion. And it needs a payment of infinite proportion. You are in debt before a holy God. And you can never pay it. You can never pay it. Not with your good works, not with how you eat your diet, not with recycling things, not with being nice to people, not with giving alms to the poor. Nothing can pay that debt. You owe God. You owe God. And so Jesus looks at us and he sees us helpless and powerless to pay this debt. People are trying. People are trying. Right now in India, people are trying with the entire celebration that's going on in some of the parts of the world, in our country, that people are crying out to pay for their sin. You can never pay. And so Jesus looks at us and says, I'm going to have compassion. I'm going to have compassion. I'm going to come down. And I'm not going to make you pay. I'm going to pay. Jesus says, I'll pay. I will suffer for your sin. I will live the perfect life that you cannot live. I will obey God's commands wholeheartedly as your substitute. And I will die on the cross to pay for the debt you owe God. Jesus did exactly the same. He had compassion on you. He canceled your debt. And he set you free. Oh, he set you free. Child of God. Oh, child of God. You are free. There is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. You are free. You are free to be the children of God. My friend, it is only when you understand this, when you understand the infinite proportion of your sin before God, and the payment that he made for you of infinite proportion, it is this gospel. Oh, it is this that humbles your heart. It is this, when you marvel at what Jesus has done, my friend, your heart melts before what he has done for you. And this gospel changes your heart. Oh, it changes your heart. It changes your heart to forgive other people. Now, there are situations where it's hard, it's still hard, and you want payment. You want payment. There are situations where you want the other person to pay. Oh, no, no, no. I want them to pay. They've done something bad. They've messed up my life. I want them to pay. I want them to suffer. And sometimes we do. And there are times when you are unable to forgive yourself. You feel like, you know what, man, I've messed up and I cannot forgive myself. I cannot forgive myself. There was a time in my life, right, where with my mother, my relationship with my mother was, she was a great mother, but I was a very angry young man, right? I was just too many things in my life. I was not a kind person, right, when I was growing up. So my mother faced a lot of the brunt of my anger, right? My rudeness. I was nasty, right? So my mother would face a lot of that. But God called me to ministry. I moved on, and I really realized some of the things. I'm a horrible son. And so when I moved to Delhi, and I felt like this is a new chapter in my life. I'm gonna me and my mother's gonna see me as a pastor. I'm gonna love my mother. I'm gonna tell her how much I love all of that, right? I'm gonna just renew this relationship, apologize for things. So I really had those things in mind when I moved back. But then soon when I moved back, my mother had dementia. She couldn't even recognize me. For 7 years. 7 years she was bedridden. She couldn't recognize anybody. And then she passed away, right? It's been another 8 years. But during that time, I was angry. Not with my mother, I was angry with myself. I told myself, Ranjit, what kind of son are you? And I was so angry. I didn't have an opportunity to say sorry. I didn't have an opportunity to mend my relationship. My mother couldn't understand anything. All that I've done, my sin was before me. And I'm like, I'm such a horrible person. I was so angry at myself. Until I realized one moment, and as I was thinking, and then Jesus reminded me, Jesus said, Ranjit, I know you're a horrible person. I know you're horrible. You're right, you're a horrible son. But I have paid for your sin. I have paid for your sin. Can you be satisfied with my payment on your behalf? Or you still feel like you need to pay for it? You need to earn it. Do you still want to, no. At that moment I realized, God, forgive me, Lord, forgive my pride. I'm satisfied with what you have done. I know I'm horrible, but I'm satisfied with your payment. Hey, maybe you're making others pay. You want them to pay. Maybe your father, your mother, your parent, your friend, what you're making. But Jesus is reminding you, yes, I know they owe you and you want them to pay. You want them to suffer. Oh, you want them. You want them to rot. But hey, I suffered for that sin. I made the payment that they can never make. I made that payment for you on the cross. Can you be satisfied with my payment on their behalf? Yes, it's a real pain. Yes, it's real. Yes, what they've done to you is horrible. And that is why you want them to suffer. I suffered. You want them to rot. I rotted in hell. You want them to be cut off. I was cut off. Can you be satisfied with what I have done for them? My friend, it is only when you understand the cross and you accept and are satisfied with what Jesus has done for your sin and for the sin of others, that is where forgiveness is going to come. I was reminded of this story, true story by Corrie ten Boom. I don't know if you've heard of this name. The book is called Hiding Place. It's her autobiography. She's during the World War II in Netherlands, she was kind of hiding and helping the Jews from the Nazis. So in her home, they would put these cupboards and all these things, and they would hide these Jews when the Nazis would come. And eventually the Nazis found out that she's been hiding a lot of these Jews from them. And so they arrested her and Betsy, her sister, and her father, right? And they put them in a concentration camp. And she narrates a story. And she tells in a book a moment when she meets, and in the concentration camp, she sees her sister die because of torture and hunger and all of this. She sees her father die. And eventually she makes it out when the war ends, and she comes out and she's a follower of Jesus, and she goes to different places and talks about the love of Christ. And one of those moments, she meets her torturer. And she writes about it. And here is, I'm going to read it for you. It says, "It was a church service in Munich that I saw him, the former SS man who had stood guard at the shower door in the processing center at Ravensbrück. He was the first of our actual jailers, and that I'd seen since that time. And suddenly it was all there. The moment she met him, the trauma came back. The room full of mocking men, the heaps of clothing, Betsy's pain-blanched face. After service, he came up to me as the church was emptying, beaming and bowing. He said, 'How grateful I am for your message, Fräulein.' He said, 'To think that, as you say, he has washed away my sins.' His hand was thrust out to shake mine, and I, who preached so often to the people in Bloemendaal the need to forgive, kept my hand at my side. She couldn't forgive. Even as the angry, vengeful thoughts boiled through me, I saw the sin of them. And I saw Jesus Christ had died for this man. Was I going to ask for more? Was I going to ask for more? She said, 'Lord Jesus, I prayed, forgive me and help me to forgive him.' I tried to smile. I struggled to raise my hand. I could not. I felt nothing, not the slightest spark of warmth or charity. And so again, I breathed the silent prayer, 'Jesus, I cannot forgive him. Give me your forgiveness.' As I took his hand, the most incredible thing happened. From my shoulder along my arm and through my hand, a current passed to pass from me to him, while into my heart sprang a love for this stranger that almost overwhelmed me. So I discovered that it is not on our forgiveness or our goodness that people are healed, but on his. When Jesus tells us to love our enemies, he gives, along with the command, the love itself. Hey, I want to ask you today, even as we face the year and even as we think about what's happened in the past, I want to ask you this question. Who do you need to forgive this morning? Who do you need to forgive? Who in your life is longing for your forgiveness? Yeah, they messed up. Yes, they've done horribly wrong. But who is longing? Who is longing for that in your life? Who are you holding grudges against? I want to ask you, who is facing the wrath of your silence? Who is at the other end? Who is facing the wrath of your gossip, the wrath of your slander, the wrath of your rudeness? Who is facing that? I want to ask you, who here, because of your posture, is already in the prison of your anger and bitterness? Jesus says, I'm going to set you free. I'm going to set you free. But there is a warning here. There is a warning that Jesus says, if you continue in this prison, it may